Have you ever walked into a room and felt an inexplicable chill run down your spine? Not because someone threatened you, not because anyone raised their voice, but because of something far more unsettling: their silence. There's a person in your life right now who wields this power. Maybe it's your boss who says nothing during meetings, but controls every decision. Maybe it's that colleague who never argues, yet somehow always gets their way. Or perhaps it's someone you know who can make you feel completely exposed without asking a single question. What if I told you that 500 years ago, a man banished from his homeland, stripped of everything he loved, discovered the most dangerous form of power known to humanity? A power so subtle that most people never see it coming. A power that doesn't require wealth, physical strength, or even words. Niccolò Machiavelli called it the virtue of terrible silence. And here's what terrifies people the most. Once you understand this secret, you'll never look at silence the same way again. You'll see it everywhere. In the pauses during conversations. In the calculated delays before responses. In the spaces between what people say and what they mean. But I have to warn you, this knowledge changes you. Because once you see how the most powerful people in the world use silence as a weapon, you can't unsee it. Stay with me. Because by the end of this video, you'll understand why the most dangerous people you'll ever meet are often the quietest. Let me tell you a story that will make your blood run cold. In 1513, Machiavelli was arrested on suspicion of conspiracy against the Medici family. He was thrown into a Florentine prison where they used a torture device called the strapado. They'd tie your hands behind your back, attach you to a rope, and drop you from a height, dislocating your shoulders. 6 times they did this to him. 6 times they asked him to confess. 6 times they expected him to scream, to beg, to break. But here's what haunts historians to this day. Machiavelli remained almost completely silent. Not the silence of a broken man, not the silence of fear, but something far more disturbing. The silence of someone who understood that the moment he spoke, the moment he showed his pain, the moment he gave them anything to work with, he'd lose. His torturers were terrified. Why? Because they couldn't read him. They couldn't break him. They couldn't control what they couldn't understand. Think about that. Here's a man being physically destroyed, yet he wielded more psychological power than his torturers. How is that possible? Because Machiavelli discovered something that most people will never understand. Silence is not the absence of power. Silence is power. And when he was finally released, barely able to walk, shoulders permanently damaged, he didn't plot revenge. He didn't rage. He did something far more calculated. He went home. He sat down. And he wrote The Prince, a book that would influence kings, conquerors, and CEOs for the next 5 centuries. But hidden in that book, coded in its pages, was the secret he learned in that prison cell. A secret about silence that the powerful have used ever since. Let me ask you something personal, and be honest with yourself. When was the last time someone's silence made you uncomfortable? Maybe you sent a text and they didn't respond for hours. Maybe you asked a question and they just stared at you. Maybe you apologized and they said nothing. How did that make you feel? Anxious? Guilty? Like you needed to fill that silence with more words, more explanations, more apologies? That's not an accident. That's neuroscience. Here's what happens in your brain when someone goes silent after you speak. Your amygdala, the fear center of your brain, starts firing. Your body releases cortisol, the stress hormone. Your heart rate increases. Your palms might even start sweating. Why? Because your brain interprets silence as a threat. Think about our ancestors 50,000 years ago. If you called out in the darkness and got no response, that silence could mean a predator was nearby. Silence meant danger. It meant death. That primal fear is still hardwired into your DNA. And the most dangerous people you'll ever meet know this. They know that when they remain silent, your brain goes into overdrive, trying to fill that void. You start making assumptions. You start projecting. You start revealing information you never intended to share. I saw this firsthand during a negotiation early in my career. I was trying to close a deal, throwing out numbers, making my case, getting more and more animated. The person across from me? They just sat there, nodding occasionally, saying nothing. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably 45 seconds, I cut my own price by 20%. They hadn't said a word. They hadn't countered. They just waited. They won that negotiation before they ever opened their mouth. Machiavelli wrote, "The lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. One must therefore be a fox to recognize traps, and a lion to frighten wolves." But he left out the most important part, the part he learned in that prison cell. You must be silent to be both. Let me be very clear about something, because this is where most people get it completely wrong. There are two types of silence, and only one of them gives you power. The first type? That's the silence of fear. The silence when you don't know what to say, when you're intimidated, when you're uncomfortable. This is weak silence. People can smell it on you. It makes you a target. But the second type? That's the silence Machiavelli discovered. That's strategic silence. Calculated silence. The silence of someone who could speak, but chooses not to. Can you feel the difference? Here's how you can tell them apart. Weak silence makes you look away. It makes you fidget. It makes you want to break it as quickly as possible. But power silence? Power silence is paired with unwavering eye contact, with stillness, with a presence that fills the room more than words ever could. Let me give you a real-world example that will crystallize this. Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, has a meeting technique that terrifies his executives. At the beginning of every major meeting, he enforces a complete silence period where everyone reads a 6-page memo. No talking, just silence, for sometimes 30 minutes or more. But here's the genius. During that silence, he's watching. He's observing. He's seeing who's uncomfortable, who's fidgeting, who keeps glancing at their phone, who's truly focused. He's gathering intelligence without asking a single question. 1. Executive said it feels like being psychologically x-rayed. Another said they'd rather give a presentation to 1,000. People then sit through that silence. Why? Because in that silence, there's nowhere to hide. Your discomfort reveals your insecurities. Your fidgeting reveals your lack of preparation. Your glances at the clock reveal your priorities. Machiavelli wrote about this concept, but he called it something different, the mirror of truth. He observed that when you force someone to sit with silence, they eventually show you exactly who they are. Think about police interrogations. The most effective technique isn't aggressive questioning. It's the long pause after the suspect speaks. That silence creates so much pressure that people start confessing to things they weren't even asked about. All right, we're at the point where I need to share with you the 3 rules of power silence that Machiavelli discovered. But before I do, I need you to understand something crucial. This knowledge is like learning how locks work. Once you understand the mechanism, you can't help but see every lock differently. You can't unknow it. And some people might not like the person you become once you start using this. Are you ready? Rule number 1. Never fill your own silence. This is where most people destroy themselves. You make a statement. You set a boundary. You make an offer. And then you get nervous. The other person says nothing, and you panic. So you elaborate. You justify. You explain. You negotiate against yourself. I watched this happen to a friend during a job interview. They asked her salary expectations. She said a number. The interviewer just looked at her, and in that 5-second silence, she dropped her number by $15,000. The interviewer wasn't thinking, that's too high. They weren't thinking anything. They were just using Machiavelli's technique. They remained silent, and my friend's fear did the rest. Here's the brutal truth. The person who speaks first, after making their position, known is the person who loses. Think about that. How many times have you undermined your own power by being uncomfortable with your own silence? Machiavelli learned this in prison. After he made a statement to his torturers, they would wait, and wait, and the silence would grow so heavy that other prisoners would start babbling, revealing information, incriminating themselves just to make the silence stop. But not Machiavelli. He understood your silence after your statement is a wall. The moment you tear down that wall yourself, you've lost. Rule number 2. Let their imagination torture them. Here's something that will blow your mind. You don't need to be intimidating if you're silent. Their mind will make you intimidating for you. Have you ever sent someone a message like, "We need to talk," and then gone silent? What happened? They probably went crazy imagining what you wanted to talk about. They probably assumed the worst. They probably prepared a defense for something you hadn't even accused them of. That's the genius of power silence. You don't have to threaten anyone. Their own mind does it for you. Machiavelli wrote, "Men are so simple and so ready to obey present necessities that one who deceives will always find those who allow themselves to be deceived." But what he really meant was, people will deceive themselves if you give them the space to do it. I once worked with a manager who was a master of this. Whenever someone made a mistake, he wouldn't yell. He wouldn't lecture. He would just call them into his office, look at them with this neutral expression, and say, "Tell me about it." And then he'd go silent. People would confess to things he didn't even know about. They'd criticize themselves more harshly than he ever would. They'd propose their own punishments, all because they were filling his silence with their own fears. The ancient Romans had a saying, "Silent enim leges inter arma." In times of war, laws fall silent. But Machiavelli understood it differently. He knew that in personal warfare, silence itself becomes the weapon. Rule number 3, strategic unpredictability. Through selective silence, this is the most advanced technique, and it's the one that creates genuine fear in people who encounter it. Here's how it works. You don't stay silent all the time. That's just being antisocial. Instead, you speak normally, engage, even be warm and friendly. But then, at strategically chosen moments, you go completely silent. The unpredictability is what creates the fear. Imagine someone who's usually chatty suddenly going silent when you ask them a specific question. What does that tell you? That question hit something. It revealed a boundary. And now you're walking on eggshells, trying not to cross it again. Machiavelli used this technique brilliantly in his diplomatic work. He would be charming and verbose in social settings, but the moment a negotiation started, he would become selectively silent. His counterparts never knew which version of him they'd get, so they were always off balance. A CEO once told me he uses this exact technique in board meetings. He'll be engaged and conversational for most of the meeting. But when someone proposes something he disagrees with, he doesn't argue. He just stops participating. He goes completely still and silent. He said it's remarkable how quickly people backtrack when faced with that unexpected silence. They'll literally change their proposal mid-sentence, just trying to get him to re-engage. Why does this work? Because humans crave patterns. We need to predict behavior to feel safe. When someone breaks the pattern unpredictably, our threat detection system goes haywire. Now, I need to address something that's probably making you uncomfortable right now. Everything I've described so far sounds manipulative, doesn't it? Maybe even cruel. And here's the truth that Machiavelli himself struggled with. It is in his personal letters. Letters that weren't meant for publication. Machiavelli wrote something that rarely gets quoted. I love my city more than my own soul. He was saying that he would do immoral things for what he believed was the greater good. But then he'd write to his friends about how isolated he felt, how people feared him, how he could never truly let his guard down. This is the cost of power silence. And you need to understand this cost before you start wielding this weapon. When you master power silence, people become wary of you. They don't trust you the same way. They always feel like you're calculating something. And they're right. You are. I learned this the hard way. After I started implementing these techniques, I noticed my relationships changing. People stopped sharing things with me casually. They became more guarded. Even my friends would sometimes pause and say, "Why are you being so quiet? What are you thinking?" The power came with a price. Intimacy. Because here's what Machiavelli never explicitly wrote, but clearly understood. You cannot be both feared and truly loved by the same people at the same time. You have to choose. And that choice isn't as easy as it sounds. There's a reason why the most powerful people often die alone. There's a reason why CEOs have the highest divorce rates. There's a reason why Machiavelli, even after writing the most influential book on power ever created, spent his final years longing for genuine human connection. Power silence creates a moat around you. It protects you, but it also isolates you. So before you go down this path, ask yourself, is the power worth the loneliness? But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. Late in his life, Machiavelli wrote something that most people never read. It's in a lesser-known book called Discourses on Livy. And in it, he writes, "It is better to be impetuous than cautious, because fortune is a woman, and if you wish to dominate her, you must beat and strike her." Wait, what? Isn't that the opposite of strategic silence? This confused scholars for centuries until they realized Machiavelli wasn't contradicting himself. He was revealing the full picture. The secret isn't to always be silent. The secret is to master both silence and action, and know when to use each. Think of it like jazz music. Jazz isn't beautiful because of the notes. Jazz is beautiful because of the spaces between the notes. Miles Davis, one of the greatest jazz musicians ever, once said, "It's not the notes you play. It's the notes you don't play." The same applies to power. You need to develop what I call strategic authenticity. Here's how it works. With people who have proven themselves trustworthy, who have shown loyalty, who have earned your vulnerability, you can be open. You can share. You can be genuine. But with people who are testing you, negotiating with you, or whose loyalty is unknown, that's when you deploy power silence. The mastery is knowing the difference. I have a friend who's incredibly successful in business, but also has a loving family and close friendships. When I asked him how he balances the ruthlessness of business with genuine relationships, he said something brilliant. In the boardroom, I'm Machiavelli. At home, I'm just Dad. The key is never confusing the two. He uses power silence at work. He's strategically unpredictable with competitors. He makes people uncomfortable in negotiations. But when he walks through his front door, he sheds that armor. That's the balance Machiavelli himself never quite achieved. But you can. All right, let's get practical. Because theory without application is just entertainment. Here are specific situations where you can start using power silence this week. In negotiations, the next time you're buying something, a car, a house, even haggling at a market, make your offer and then go completely silent. Don't explain. Don't justify. Don't fill the space. Just make intense eye contact and wait. Guarantee the salesperson will start negotiating with themselves within 30 seconds in conflicts. When someone criticizes you or attacks you, your instinct is to defend yourself immediately. Instead, try this. Look at them, really look at them, and say nothing for 5 to 10 seconds. Watch how uncomfortable they become. Watch how they start softening their criticism. Watch how they begin justifying themselves. You didn't argue. You didn't defend. You just waited. In leadership, if you manage people, try the Bezos technique. In your next meeting, instead of talking first, hand out a document and sit in silence while everyone reads it. Watch what happens to the energy in the room. Watch who squirms and who doesn't. But here's the crucial part, and this is what separates ethical use from manipulation. After you've used the silence to gather information, after you've established your power, after you've created that healthy amount of respect or fear, then you reward people with transparency and fairness. You use the silence to create order, not chaos. You use it to establish boundaries, not to abuse people. You use it to protect yourself, not to hurt others. Machiavelli wrote, "The promise given was a necessity of the past. The word broken is a necessity of the present." But I'd modify that. The silence kept is a strategy of the present. The words shared are a gift to those who've earned them. In personal life, here's where it gets delicate. With people you love, use silence differently. Use it not as a weapon, but as a space. When your partner is upset, don't rush to fix it. Don't fill the silence with solutions. Just be there, silent, present. Let them process. When your child comes to you with a problem, don't immediately offer advice. Ask one question, then go silent and actually listen to their full answer. This is different from power silence. This is what I call presence silence. It's just as powerful, but it builds connection instead of fear. Now, I need to give you a serious warning that Machiavelli himself would have given you. Once you start seeing power dynamics clearly, you can't unsee them. And that can make you cynical. You'll start noticing silence everywhere. You'll see your boss using it, your friends using it, even your family using it. And you'll start questioning whether anyone is being genuine with you, or if everyone is just playing power games. This is the curse of awareness. Machiavelli became so obsessed with power dynamics that he reportedly had difficulty enjoying simple pleasures. He saw strategy in everything. He saw manipulation in every interaction. Don't let that happen to you. Here's my advice. Think of this knowledge like martial arts. You learn martial arts not so you can go around fighting people, but so you can defend yourself when necessary. And the true masters of martial arts are often the gentlest, most peaceful people you'll ever meet. Why? Because they're so confident in their ability to defend themselves that they don't need to be aggressive. They don't need to prove anything. The same applies to power silence. Master it so thoroughly that you don't need to use it constantly. Master it so completely that you can choose when to deploy it and when to just be human. The paradox is this: the more power you have, the less you should need to display it. Let me tell you what really happened after Machiavelli was released from prison. Yes, he wrote The Prince. Yes, he influenced history. But here's what most people don't know. He sent that book to the Medici family, the same people who had tortured him, as a gift. He hoped it would get him back into political favor. They never responded. He died in poverty, never having regained the political power he once had. The book that would make him immortal was largely ignored during his lifetime. So was it worth it? Did his mastery of power silence actually give him power? Or did it just make him better at analyzing power while never quite attaining it again? This is the question that haunts me. And it should haunt you too, because here's the deepest truth about power silence. It makes people fear you, yes. It gives you tactical advantages, yes. It protects you from manipulation, yes, but fear is not the same as respect. Silence is not the same as wisdom, and power is not the same as fulfillment. Machiavelli spent his final years writing comedies. Comedies. This man, who wrote the darkest political treatise in history, spent his last days trying to make people laugh. What does that tell you? I think it tells us that he realized something too late. All the power in the world. Doesn't matter if you have no one to share your life with. The people who are most feared are often the most lonely. The people who are most strategically silent are often the ones who most desperately want someone to truly hear them. So here's what I want you to take away from this. Yes, master power silence. Yes, understand how it works. Yes, use it when you need to protect yourself or establish boundaries or navigate dangerous situations. But never forget that it's a tool, not a way of life. The most powerful thing Machiavelli never wrote, but probably wished he had, is this. The greatest power is not in making people fear your silence, but in making them cherish your words. Think about the people in your life whose words you truly value. It's not because they talk all the time. It's because when they do speak, it matters. They've earned your attention through selective communication. That's the real mastery. Use silence to protect yourself. Use silence to establish respect. Use silence to create space for truth. But use your words to build. Use your words to connect. Use your words to love. Because at the end of your life, no one remembers the negotiations you won or the power plays you executed. They remember the conversations that changed them. They remember the words that healed them. They remember the moments when you chose to break your silence and truly be seen. Machiavelli's body was buried in an elaborate tomb in Florence. Thousands of tourists visit it every year. They take pictures. They post on social media. But he's alone in there. Don't let that be your story. Master the silence. But don't let it master you. And remember, the most terrifying thing about silence isn't that it makes other people fear you. It's that if you're not careful, you'll fear yourself, the isolated, calculating person you might become. Now you know the secret. Now you understand the power. Now you face the choice. How will you use it? The answer to that question will determine not just your power, but your humanity. Choose wisely. Machiavelli never got a second chance, but you do. The person who masters silence without losing their soul. That person truly has power.